Hey, it's Andy Morse here. Welcome to part 3 of Serenity in the Trenches. We're getting into some good, juicy stuff today. In the last part, we thought about the signs that we need to identify in order to recharge our batteries. In this episode, we are thinking about the kind of how of this. What are your go-to sources of self-care and rest? When we think of self-care, retreating, resting, we might have a specific source of energy drain in mind. And as we explored in the last part, there are different signs we might experience that tell us we need to rest and recharge. This is because there are different things that can cause it. And as a result, it might not be that there is a kind of catch-all form of self-care that will help in any situation. An image that I found really helpful comes from Karina Nickerson's use of the word hitch. I also like to use the word tether, even anchor, to kind of highlight things that we are attached to that we haven't necessarily chosen and perhaps aren't even fully aware that we are in the clutches of, to which we are tethered, from which we are drained.
So I will literally take at least one day a week where I am off of technology. And I wonder if you have something similar, especially if you're a highly sensitive person like I am. It's really important that we take care of our nervous systems. And if we don't take care of our nervous systems, it'll catch up with us for sure. And usually at a time when, it doesn't work very well for you, right? Meaning for me, sometimes this has hit me when I'm in a push to complete something in my work, for example. And if I haven't taken care to keep my batteries charged and to stay filled, right, I can lose traction and momentum during the times when I really need to have the most endurance. So unplugging from technology, really, really, really good for me. And if you haven't tried it yet, I highly suggest that you do so. If it's hard for you to do that, then even more reason why you need to. Because anytime you're hitched to something outside of you, if you need something externally to be okay, you're really not deeply okay.
I actually put it in an acronym. I'm just kind of an acronym junkie. So stronger. And so S is for having a spiritual practice. In my case, I practice yoga therapy through Krishnamacharya's philosophy. Time to recharge, so that's T. R is relationships, making sure that they're healthy and thriving. O is for having an outlet, a creative outlet, which I know you know a whole lot about. N is for nutrition, am I eating well? G, a growth exercise, do I have that kind of integrated into my routines? E is for exercise, am I moving? And then R is just rest, am I making time to just relax, rest, and do nothing?
Yes, Leah, I love an acronym. When used sparingly, I've encountered some organisations who use them far too much, to the point where they literally have an acronym to remember the different acronyms that they use. But Leah's is wonderful. It's a great example of what an acronym is supposed to do. Stronger is the outcome, and the words for each letter of stronger contribute to that outcome.
If I feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, I do mindful breathing and relax my face. I've heard that those little muscles around our eyes are connected to the center or place, whatever that is called, which regulates our heartbeat. So relaxing my face also relaxes my heart. That is the first aid for me.
These kinds of simple, basic physical exercise are really useful, like deep breathing. Things we just kind of forget, or at least I do. I find myself shallow breathing and tense when I'm stressed. And bringing awareness to that place is huge. Starting with slow, deep breaths. Then I move to my jaw, my neck, my shoulders, my abdomen, and so on. Just feeling at home in the body starts with relaxation. I love how Alice sets up her relationship with self-care.
My go-to things for self-care and rest tend to vary depending on kind of the different styles of burnout that I might be experiencing. So if I'm starting to feel irritable with the people around me, or if I'm feeling restless, then nothing beats a good woodland walk or a trip to the beach for me. There's something so rejuvenating about getting back out into nature and feeling connected to the simplicity of the natural world, away from all of the electronics and the busyness. For me, I really need that connection. I need to smell the salt of the sea. I need to feel the trees, the bark of the trees, and touch the leaves and really anchor myself back into my body and everything that's real, because I have a tendency to get stuck up in my head, and getting away and just smelling the real world is what helps me in those situations. If I'm feeling burnt out in the sense of like being hopeless about the world and worried about politics and all of that things, then for me, usually what helps then is connection with people, like really having a good heart-to-heart with somebody, and feeling like I can reconnect with kind of how good people actually can be, I guess, and talking to people about things that really matter to me, rather than just like the small talk kind of thing. Like I need to really feel like I have that heart-to-heart connection with somebody, and that helps me to feel more optimistic about the world. And then I guess the other kind of burnt out that I get is kind of about my business. You know, if I'm starting to feel overwhelmed about how much work I've set for myself, or whether I'm going to make enough money this month, and all of those kind of worries about whether I've really got what it takes to follow through with all of the ambitions I have. That's usually a sign for me that I've been in creation for too long, that I've been pushing myself into output for too long, and I need to take a couple of hours, preferably a day, to just go into input mode and read things that other people have written and listen to podcasts that I love and things like that I tend to not make enough time for normally. And if I can just allow myself to enjoy other people's creativity for a while, and then take some time in silence after that, then I find that my own optimism and creativity starts coming back again.
I think this is so important to consider the different sources of overwhelm. Feed that with the right kind of self-care. Respond to that with the right kind of self-care. Otherwise, we might end up just kind of going around in circles, reminding us of that Finnish saying that Tula highlighted in the last part: what creates it will cure it. You know, not when it comes to energy depletion.
I cringe here because the answer is really boring. I've avoided this truth for most of my life, but good habits really are the foundation for everything else. For me, that means early nights, blocking distracting apps on my phone, being disciplined about my work, my behaviour, my meditation practice, exercise, diet, and in caring for my environment. Self-care for me is actually about stepping up to be my best self. That's ultimately what's going to leave me feeling peaceful and good about myself.
It's easy to get sucked into the self-care industry speak and really kind of start to overcomplicate this stuff. And so I love that Josie brings it back to basics here, reminding us that we know exactly what we need to do. Now, if we're willing to listen, we know which habits are serving us and which ones are causing us to kind of falter. It's not all about the massage or relaxing bubble bath. It's about clearing the clutter so that the person you were committed to becoming can flourish, can start to explore the world, can start to explore their curiosity.
One of the things that I love to do and that I consider an act of self-care is listen to podcasts that nourish me. And one that I enjoy on a regular basis, along with millions of others, is the TED Radio Hour. Recently, there was an episode called How to Be Better, and it was focused on the self-care industry. And one of the speakers was talking about how self-care has traditionally meant taking time off, going on vacation, getting massages, manicures or pedicures, those sorts of very important, but in her mind, somewhat superficial activities that, yes, they are acts of self-care, but they don't go deep enough. And so that has challenged me to think about what are the ways that I'm taking care of myself and on a deeper level, my soul, what feeds me, what nourishes me, and enables me to go out and contribute to the world. There are a few things. One, I was pointing out my cat playing with the toy, spending time with animals, specifically my animals, my cat and my dog. But anytime I get a chance to interact with animals, it feels like there's something in me that is replenished. And that's very important for me to notice and honor on a daily basis.
So self-care is an enabler. This is such a beautiful point that Beth makes. It carries a deeper, more transcendent purpose within it. And animals takes us onto a big source of self-care and perspective and rest for Gentle Rebels.
Nature is a big one for me. I live in a beautiful place near the mountains, and we have paths and rivers and things downtown. So a lot of times when I find myself out of sorts or needing to collect myself, going outside into nature is wonderful. Now that it's starting to snow and getting wintry here, really solitude and a couple of practices that have really helped me on a daily basis would be meditation. I use about 20 minutes or so, 22 minutes a day of meditation, and also journaling. So I spend time in my morning pages like the artist's way, and I've developed that practice to where it's kind of enmeshed together, the meditation and the journaling. And I find that when I do those things, even if everything else, the rest of my day, goes all to hell, if I'll do those things, I do find myself staying in a place that's more creative, that's more centered, and at its core, more joyful.
So Jacob refers to practices here, things that we can do that might not necessarily feel immediately gratifying. Some days they're easier than others, like exercise. They are disciplines that create their own rewards over time in the long run. Meditation, journaling, exercise, prime examples of this. The results rarely feel immediate. In fact, we might actually experience pain and struggle and resistance when we're doing them in the moment. But over time, these are examples of practices that help us grow in immeasurable and unfathomable ways. Nancy says, I like to listen to guided meditation audios in Spanish. I choose guided ones because they help prevent my mind from wandering, and Spanish because it's not my native language, so I have to pay more attention to every word. Wow, I love this. In itself, like learning something new, something difficult, something challenging, a new language it can be a rewarding form of self-care. It gives you that reward of learning and of growth and of progress, of moving intentionally and slowly in a new direction.
The second thing I do when it's time for me to recharge my batteries is to feel my feelings. So I'll unplug from technology, but I'll also sit in meditation and take long breaks of silence, just sitting on my couch in the living room, watching the trees outside, breathing, being with what's coming up, being with my heart, being with my emotions. And, sometimes it's quite stormy, and I need to have a good cry, or I need to express myself and my feelings and what's happening for me in my journal. So I'll do sort of those kinds of things to emotionally process when I take these times off, when it's time for me to recharge my batteries. Because when I'm going and going and going, and this is true for you too, you're not feeling.
So this is a great perspective too. Self-care starts with self-acceptance. Accepting what's going on around you and within you. Only through honouring and allowing those emotions can you respond in a healthy way, clearing out the system, unclogging anything that might cause trouble later on. And this resonates with what Jennifer Kahnweiler says.
Counterintuitively for me, I think it's walking away from whatever is stressing me. Even a short break I find is helpful, and I can get more clarity. Another thing I try to do is to really listen in the morning to those thoughts that go through my mind. And I've really tried to stay in bed a little bit longer. I heard from a woman who runs a spa retreat, Deborah, in Rancho La Puerta. And she always does that. And I thought, what a great idea. Not to worry so much, but kind of go through my head what's happening and what I'm thinking about. And a lot of clarity comes from that, as long as you don't get caught up in too much of the thought racing. So that's a good idea. And then another friend suggested that I think about one thing to be grateful for before I have my feet hit the ground. And I've been trying to do that too. So always open to new ideas as well.
We often launch into the day like bullets out of the gun. I remember making this change about 10 years, it was probably more than 10 years ago. But until this point, I would work out what time I needed to be out of the house and then what time I would need to get up if I allocated 30 minutes to get ready. So I was able to work back, okay, I need to leave then. I can get up at this time. No margin, no extra time, plenty of stress. But then I started to get up, 30 minutes before I needed to, and then an hour before, and eventually like 2.5 hours before I needed to. And it absolutely changed everything. It added that margin. It enabled me to slow down, to think, to write, to read, to meditate, to exercise, to ease my way into the day so that, like Jacob said, even if the rest of my day goes to hell, I find myself staying in a place that's more creative, that's more centered, and at its core, more joyful, because it's founded on positive, proactive practices.
In terms of rest, I've also learned that I need to distinguish between good rest and bad rest. The kind of rest that actually genuinely helps and the kind that's just a kind of opting out of responsibility or any kind of self-care and thought at all. I try to ask the hard questions now. Will this activity nurture me and restore me, honestly? Or is this thing I'm calling rest just more mindless consuming that's feeding an unhealthy way of being? Reading a new book never fails to help shift me into a new mindset, so that's always a good choice for me.
It's a really important thing for us to consider for ourselves, to ask ourselves these questions and be honest about the answers.
I think the thing that I crave the most is just time on my own, irrespective of what I might be doing. I work a lot around people and give a lot out to people, and I'm a very typical introvert in that I need time away to recharge and to let my soul breathe, I think. And one of my favourite ways of doing that is reading, a very stereotypical introvert type thing, I guess, but that works for me.
Never underestimate the power of reading. For those who don't like reading, I always wonder if it's just because they've never read the right book. And with audiobooks now, you don't even need to read. But connecting with the ideas of an author, bringing your imagination to the party, is always a great way to reconnect then with yourself, to root yourself in the present moment and in the past, in ideas that are being explored by the author at a deeper soul level.
My go-to source of self-care is alone time. I need time by myself to sort out all of the emotions and feelings that I pick up from other people. I spend my alone time scrolling through social media or watching my favorite TV show. I
really like the fact that Sarah mentioned social media and TV here, because it's really easy to give this sort of stuff a bad rap. But if it brings restoration and recharge, then we should totally honour that. We should give ourselves permission to engage it. And Thea has some great thoughts on this kind of downtime guilt and how to kind of push beyond it.
For me personally, that's Netflix. So this brings me to a problem that many people have with downtime and self-care. And really there's two problems. One is that they don't take it, they don't do self-care, and the other is that there's downtime guilt. So I actually was literally just having this conversation with the person who cut my hair this morning. She said she often spends her days off cleaning because she wants to feel productive. And I said, but self-care is productive. And that's something I forget all the time too. So sometimes, I want to do self-care and block off something in my calendar. If you really have this strong idea that you must be productive all the time, put it in your calendar. Sometimes I'll put it on my to-do list. Watch something. So, that's one thing, right? The guilt of self-care in general is a real thing.
The power of scheduling. This is a mindset thing, and one that stops us from falling into the free time trap. If you schedule in time to watch your favourite TV show, then no, you're not free tonight. In the sense that you're not free for someone else to make plans for you and around you. Only you get to set the parameters of what free means. Make it official if you need to. Put it in the diary. This is the same around big events as well, as Sarah Santacroce so rightly points out. Scheduling in time doing nothing can be the most self-caring thing you could possibly do.
I always plan in an extra morning whenever I do have something going on at night, so some kind of event, which I actually try not to go to. It's not my thing, but every now and then, there's just no other way around it. So I go, but then I know the next morning I'm basically not planning for anything, because oftentimes I've gotten better. Meditation has definitely helped, but oftentimes I can't fall asleep because my head just keeps on going and spinning all the discussions around in my head, so that after the event I just can't go to sleep. So I know that the next morning I'm going to plan extra time and just do nothing and focus on self-care.
It's a really good thing to remember. Spending energy is like spending money. We can't just keep on spending it as if the supply is endless. After a big splurge, a big purchase, we must save again. And like money, we can choose to spend it on things that really add value to our lives. But sometimes we'll also have to spend it on necessities, things that maybe don't feel all that great, but are needed.
One of the main things I do, one of the main things, and the easiest things I do, is to shut myself off in this apartment that you can see I'm in. I'm in an apartment right now. I live in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I live in this beautiful, small apartment. But it is my cave. It is my back cave. It is where I escape to. As soon as I feel tired, as soon as I feel like there's more self-care that needs to be done, I could go get a massage. Massages are very cheap in Thailand. I could go for an acupuncture, or I could go acupuncture session, or I could go hang out with friends or family. But the real thing that recharges me is as soon as I shut that door of my apartment and I sit down on my couch or I sit down on my bed with a manga in my hand, I am absolutely perfectly fine. And that's exactly what I need.
So I really like this idea from Boom. What returns us to normal? I remember when I was a kid, I used to be quite protective over my Saturdays. At the end of a long week, surrounded by kids and demands at school, I just wanted to kind of do nothing, just sit back, read a football magazine, eat some Skittles, and rearrange the furniture in my bedroom. And that returned me to a place of normality, so that I could then get back out there and do it all again next week and have enough energy to get through that. Jacqueline Strickland emphasizes one point. She says, quality sleep is my number one restorative practice. Again, how much is this missing in our modern world? The messages we hear about sleep being for, when we die. Life's too short for sleeping. And like naps, when you tell someone you like to have a nap and they frown upon it, like, that's nuts. What's that about? The evidence supports sleep as the number one foundation of health alongside, nutrition and movement. But without good sleep, we don't have the willpower, the energy, or the metabolism to make either exercise or nutrition as effective as they could and need to be.
In general, I care for myself by photographing in nature, watching TV series or movies, sometimes too much. I love to listen to podcasts, read, or I just be alone in silence. I do listen to music, but I've noticed that no matter what kind of music I listen, it usually stimulates me because I don't do background music. I dive into music. Sometimes that is self-care if I'm in understimulated state. And I also noticed that different kind of brain training, brain exercises, and of course meditation have very beneficial effects, even though it is extremely hard for me to quiet my mind. Weight blanket has helped me a lot to stay still and also keep my mind still.
Yes, Tula. I was actually expecting more responses about creativity and creative practices. For me, music is an absolute go-to. An hour sat at the piano playing songs, writing songs, just singing, noodling around with no agenda. It's a huge release. I always emphasize the word process. when talking about, the idea of creative process, having a creative process, because it's through creativity that we can process all the messy, hard to define emotional residue from our lives. It's about creative processing of that stuff.
I have a lot of self-care rituals, and sometimes I'll choose one and I'll do that every day, and then I'll get bored with that and then I'll move on to another. One that I've been doing for the past few months is yoga. I'll do yoga first thing in the morning, like 4 or 5 days a week. Lately, I have been doing it more like 3 times a week. And on the other days, I'll have a journaling practice. Or I'll sometimes say mantras. So those are those are anchoring self-care rituals. So they ensure that I never stray too far from my true essence.
Nice little hack there, Michaela. For those who get easily bored of routines and kind of waylaid, have a number of things. Mix it up through the week. Don't put pressure on yourself if you miss your practice. This is what kills off so many New Year's resolutions, isn't it? Like overcommitment to the intention. Then when life takes over and you miss a day, like you've committed to this practice, I'm going to exercise every day. You miss a day and then you fall off the wagon. And you write off the entire thing and give up. But actually, this idea of practice and having different things that we will experiment with just gives us permission to be slow and steady, to experiment and to keep our eyes on what's important.
Again, I wish I could say that I did a regular yoga practice and I got 8 hours of sleep every night, but that's definitely not true. It's really, really hard for me to find moments of rest during my day. What I actually try to do is keep my phone off as much as possible or away from me so that I'm not constantly checking it. And I do the same with social media. I try to keep social media to a minimum. I have found that these two things are actually such a great source of self-care and rest. They really help me to not leak my energy constantly during the day because I'm constantly checking.
These are really good disciplines that Lauren's developed. It can be so hard to keep the phone away from us. I don't know about you, but I find myself just mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds without realizing I've even picked up my phone in the first place. Build boundaries around this stuff so that you'll know there will be a time to engage. It's not a full prohibition, but a healthy set of guidelines. And this brings me on to environment as a key factor to self-care and rest. Don't bring negative sources of energy depletion into the environment where you're resting. And carve out space of restoration, of recuperation, like Beth has.
I also love, I'm coming to you from the room in our house that we call the prayer room, the meditation room, the quiet room, the reading room. It's it's a very comfy and nourishing and generative place for my husband and me. And so spending time here is part of my self-care. My spiritual community is absolutely part of my self-care. That might seem counterintuitive, being that I identify as an introvert, that I'd say that being in community is self-care. But being someone who does work at home, alone, I'm basically on my own probably 90% of the time. By the time Sunday morning comes around, I'm craving interaction. I'm craving people and community and interacting with others in a meaningful and deep way that leaves me transformed and inspired every single time. So I see my relationship with that community as fundamental to who I am and how I take care of myself. And then I would finally say sleep. Sleep is really important to me. Napping, making sure that I'm honoring and taking time, structuring my schedule so that it allows me to do what I need to do. And getting really quality sleep at night is very important. So those are all things that I incorporate. And to remember that self-care, it can be hiring a coach or a therapist and working with that person. It's that deeper kind of soul work that you're doing that doesn't replace the manicure or the massage or the shopping trip that is also self-care, but it absolutely should be foundational to your practices. At least that's my experience, and that's something I'd offer for your consideration.
This final thought is a great reminder too. Doing the difficult soul work is great for self-care. Delving into therapy to make sense of the past, or working with a coach in order to set the path for the future. These are things that ultimately serve to bring us more into alignment with the deeper sense of who we are as individuals. They'll probably throw up a painful moment or two along the way, but they're so worth it.
Another thing I love doing is going to watch football. I don't get to do that much these days, to be honest, but going to a live football match, being part of a crowd, but also being alone in that is actually restorative to me. You feel not as if you're isolated, but I don't have to interact or talk deep with anybody. So that's actually quite restorative for me. And having said that, conversely, another thing that I love doing is hanging out kind of one-to-one with a close friend and being able to talk vulnerably and talk openly and go really deep without fear of judgment or, that kind of thing. And feeling free and feeling loved and feeling accepted and being able to be open and to receive that back, and to be that for somebody else. I find that really good for my soul, and those are the things that I do.
Oh, yes, to both of these, Mark. I love watching sport, connecting with the unfolding stories that emerge from the football pitch, from the rugby pitch, rugby especially. Singing the Welsh national anthem at the Principality Stadium, surrounded by passionate fans, all singing in one voice, just makes the neck hairs stand on end just thinking about it. And as far as like restorative conversations go, I had this experience with Mark over the summer when I visited him in North Wales, and I totally concur. This is a real practice of self-care.
I guess there's two things. There's kind of like the day-to-day sources. So little things like meditation, having a nap, going for walks. Important self-care, I think, isn't really just about the big stuff. It's the little things you do every day. But every now and then, just getting away. I think in the idealized version of my life, there'd be things like cocktails and hammocks and beaches would feature a lot more, the odd luxury massage. But most of the time, that's not really a practical option for me. So just getting somewhere different, not taking any work, chilling out, even if it's just an hour outside the city and I'm, spending a couple of days in a country pub, then I think that is an important source of self-care for me.
Yeah, never underestimate a simple change of scenery. As I mentioned, I went to Llandudno over the summer to see Mark. I stayed in a little cabin beneath a mountain for 3 nights. And it did me a world of good. I felt absolutely wonderful afterwards. I'm probably not actually far off an hour outside of Liverpool. I don't know how far. It's probably about that from Liverpool, which is Neil's city. So I can see totally why he recommends that for himself.
I live about an hour away from the Rocky Mountains, and I feel so fortunate to live that close to such a beautiful landscape. It's beautiful in the winter, it's beautiful in the summertime. So getting out to the mountains is it just feeds my soul. It feels so good. When I can't get out to the mountains, definitely taking my dog for long walks. She loves to be outside. And another one is meditation. Probably in the last year, I've discovered how great meditation is. And I can't imagine life without meditating. So those are my staples for self-care.
Interacting with our environment, being at one with the space around us. Sometimes we can fail to see what's right in front of us. Coming back to the aspects of where we are can be really, really restorative. Even a walk around areas of town that I've not explored before. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that in the town where I live. I know not everybody would be able to do that. Or like when I'm running early in the morning, just looking up and really noticing what's going on around me. We can get so busy going from one place to the next that we can just begin to take our environment for granted and not see the stuff, the beauty, the things that are there in front of us. This is one of the reasons I think, getting away has the impact that it does. Because our eyes in that situation have to see newness. We have to connect with things we've not seen before. And so we naturally gravitate towards that stuff, the stuff that we fail to see, that we assimilate into our taking for granted in our own spaces.
Time and space away, time in nature. I have to force myself to do that, if I'm honest. But once I've been out walking in nature and in that kind of green, airy, fresh environment, I do invariably come back restored. I just have to force myself to do that, almost as a discipline.
Drawing, so I love drawing kind of like geometric shapes. That's something I got into in the last few years, and I find that very, again, meditative. So mandalas, and reading. I can always guarantee that reading will, put me in a better mood.
About 12 years ago, I discovered yoga through my daughter, Jessie, who told me it really helped her so much. She was in college at the time, and I decided to try it and really love it. Yoga, it helps me be more like Fred, relaxed, and it carries over throughout the day, just not only my body feeling more relaxed, but also my mind. It gives clarity and focus. And so occasionally I'll do a YouTube video with it, but I really like the class because there's some sort of energy that kind of comes up there. And it also gets me out of my head when I leave my environment and go to that actual class. I've never really had a bad yoga class, so let me put it that way. That's probably my secret weapon now for me. If I miss yoga, I'm very disturbed. I do other exercise too, like swimming. That's another good release. And I've always found that if, I've done that for years, some type of like moving your body, getting your head going, but particularly yoga, I think is just like really great. I love it.
I couldn't agree more. For me, swimming or a full body workout really, really does the job.
Outdoor activities, exercise, reading, great conversation gives me rest. And it also helps me process because I keep a lot in my head and it's like, this idea, that idea, it's a lot going on up here. I am able to sort and filter out and listen, improve my listening, and just grow in having one-on-one conversations. So that's a big one.
This is worth reinforcing. Even as introverts and highly sensitive people, even if we do a lot of processing in our heads, it can still be really helpful to verbalize, to converse with our closest allies, to get things out. It can sort of shrink things that feel huge. Just saying something out loud can release us from the tyranny of a thought or a thought process, a spiraling thought pattern. By just verbalizing it, getting it reflected back by somebody else, can suddenly put it in perspective. And it can be a massive contributor to self-care.
And as far as just kind of like recharge self-care rituals, I like taking baths. I love essential oils. I try to spend time in nature, which is tough when it gets cold outside. But yeah, so just the typical things. Exercise is big for me, getting those endorphins. And eating this is going to sound hippie-like, but a high vibration diet. So to me, high vibration is, fresh fruits and vegetables, whole foods in their natural form, like how they came from nature. So it was a potato when it was in nature. You take it, you cook it, it's still a potato. It wasn't pulverized and didn't have a bunch of stuff added to it. So to me, diet is a powerful form of self-care.
Absolutely agree with Michaela. Not easy to navigate or stick to when it comes to eating the right things, but 100% of the time, I find if I eat right, I feel so much better for it. And this feeds that trio that I mentioned earlier, the quality sleep, nutrition, and exercise or movement.
My number one go-to source of self-care is exercise. I've always been an athlete and I love moving my body. So that could look like a strength and conditioning and cardio workout. That could look like a Pilates workout, or it could look like going on a run or a walk. If I'm sore and I just did a hard workout the day before, I'm probably just gonna go on a little walk the next day. I love going on walks. I love walking with a purpose, like I'm walking to the grocery store to get something and walk back, even if it's like a mile away. I love being outside and walking, moving my body. I love dancing in the living room, especially to Lizzo these days.
So the aim of self-care is not a productive one. It's a being one. Its purpose is its purpose.
getting that good night's sleep every night and sleeping for as long as my body needs. My body usually needs about 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep every night. I know some people, to some people that's a lot, but that's what my body needs, and everyone's body is different. And once I, learn to listen to that and not feel shame about sleeping a lot, which is totally subjective, right? I'm able to feel better because, so I let myself sleep. I don't wake up to an alarm unless I don't want to make sure I don't miss a flight, something like that. But I don't see clients until 11 a.m. I typically don't do work until 10 or 11 a.m., other kind of work. So I have mornings to myself, and that's part of my self-care.
So this is really good permission to receive. Listen to and understand your body's own needs. They're not the same as other people's. Nancy emphasizes the role of walking in her self-care. She says, I like to walk several miles a day, fast. I live in Manhattan and often zip from appointment to appointment by foot rather than by subway, bus or taxi. That's me wearing a backpack loaded with my laptop, notebooks, work shoes, sunglasses, rain gear, 2 meals and fair trade chocolate, yet feeling energized by being outdoors amid the shadows of my buzzing city in all weather. Wow. I must say I love to walk too, and I really don't mind walking in the rain. I'll try to do it as much as possible. There's real freedom in it. Ideas and commuting can often be best buddies, but they require our minds to be receptive and our ears to be listening. And I find walking is really the kind of rhythmic nature of it is conducive massively for me in terms of coming up with good creative ideas. And so Tracy Cooper says also, walking in nature is another go-to. He says, my other go-to for self-care very specifically is nature and the outdoors. I have several walking trails that allow me to just move my body and be in communion with that simple act. For pure rest, the beach is my favourite place to encounter nature, along with any running water. I love waterfalls and streams. Lastly, getting good sleep is the cornerstone of all my functioning, along with a diet that is free from negative health effects. So in there was another thing that I was expecting a little more of in the responses to this question. Water, running water, the restorative powers of water, being by rivers and lakes and oceans. It's a really good reminder. For me, experiencing the magnificent power of the ocean, of waves, massive. They conjure feelings of smallness and gratitude in me.
I also make time to consciously recommit to attention and mindfulness as a practice, as a behaviour again, not just as a vague kind of intention. I deliberately do things more slowly and with my full attention, washing up, hanging laundry, anything. I remind myself that everything around me is important and meaningful, and that there's always something to enjoy. And I actively look for it. I make it a game. What's good here? What's happening? Pulling silly faces at myself in the mirror also helps.
Yes, and laughing. What a huge one. Really allowing ourselves to let go and enjoy things, to give ourselves over to laughter and joy. Totally spot on, Josie.
Other than that, weird as it is, Minecraft, the video game, is my source of rest because my son loves it, and when he's playing it, I can sneak off and read a book. And books have always been a big source of nourishment for me.
It's brilliant. Lauren highlights the feeling of guilt or responsibility we might have for others and the relief that is experienced when we know others are doing things that they enjoy. There's something freeing about that, that enables us to just relax into the stuff that is most restoring for us. And so to finish, I want to consider the notion of contribution as well. An often overlooked part of self-care is probably one to think of carefully as highly sensitive givers. I know that this can be a source of overwhelm and burnout as well. But feeling like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself can be really nurturing and gratifying. Feeling like a part of the greater story. To come back to that vision from Jim Woods in the first part of this series, the power of story, finding our place in the bigger story. That's what Nancy reminds me of when she says, several years ago I became vegan because it's a little contribution I can make to prevent the destruction of our sacred planet, reduce the suffering of animals, and contribute to my own good health. You know, we can apply this to other things as well. Not comparing our needs with other people's ability to operate at levels that we can't. Take time to understand your own self-care needs and also begin to answer the question, what does this make possible? Boom says, I'll read my mangas, eat my food and take my rest and do my work. That's all. I don't talk to anyone, and that's how I recharge and get back to normal. Remembering that good self-care is the foundation of being energized, healthy, and the best version of ourselves is important to really anchor into. It makes our goals, our dreams, our vision possible. All that stuff we thought about in the first part when it comes to having a positive drive in our lives, that gets derailed, it gets fragmented and undermined by depleted batteries. And it gets restored, realigned, and re-energized by good self-care that is both proactive and restorative as we go. We can set the foundations in place each day, have practices and ways of thinking that are in our toolbox when unexpected things come our way. So we don't simply double down, as Michaela said. We don't make it worse by ploughing on, ploughing further and deeper into potential burnout. But we step back, we take heed, we give ourselves the best possible chance of moving through whatever we are facing right now. So what are your go-to sources of self-care and rest? And what might you try as a result of hearing these ideas? I'd love to hear from you again. Feel free to send me an email with your response, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon. Goodbye.